Jennifer Crumbley, the mother of the teenager who shot and killed 4 students and injured 7 others at Oxford High School in Michigan in November of 2021, on trial right now for her part, facing involuntary manslaughter charges, a case that really could be quite precedent setting considering all of the horrible incidents like this that we have in our country, and putting more responsibility on the parents for being aware of what their kids are up to and into, and also their actions should they decide to carry them out. Joining me, Eric Faddis, attorney, to discuss. Let's talk about that. This trial is a very interesting one we have not seen before with this sort of a dynamic. Really, what could this mean going forward? And we'll also talk about it for the cases in the past as well. Should she be convicted and be charged with the involuntary manslaughter based on what her son did?
Yeah, Tony, this is a historic case, and it could have a huge ripple effect for cases like this throughout the country going forward. And like you said, unfortunately, we have this sort of school shooting epidemic, and so I would not be surprised if we saw this again. In the law, generally, you're responsible for your own behavior, but with some exceptions, you're not really responsible for someone else's behavior. The prosecutor in the Crumbly case is being creative in how they're using the law to try to say that Jennifer Crumbley and the husband James knew that school shooter Ethan Crumbley had issues. I guess was volatile and violent, according to the prosecutor, and the parents did not do enough to prevent that child from having a gun. In fact, that they helped him get the gun. At least the father did. And so it has a huge impact on how these cases are going to be handled going forward.
And it's going to be very interesting for that going forward, because we really have to prove here. I mean, what do we have to prove here? That she was just aware that her son seems to have some, I'm going to say mental illness going on, or some sort of, unhealthy thoughts, and have access to the weapon. I mean, what are we trying to prove here exactly to show that something could have been done? What's the bar?
Yeah, so it appears that the prosecutor is proceeding on like an involuntary manslaughter type charge, or even something a little bit more strong. One thing the prosecutor is going to have to prove is causation. They've got to prove that the Crumbley's actions had a causal relationship with this school shooting. And then on top of that, I think they have to prove that the parents knew or should have known that Ethan Crumbley was having problems, had a proclivity for violence, and at least could have carried this out. And then they essentially gave him a significant aid in doing that. So it's a reasonably high bar for the prosecutor to prove here, because the parents were not the ones who pulled the trigger.
Sure, sure. I mean, and in this case specifically, it's such a gray. The whole thing is a gray area, because you really have to prove that you, as a parent, were that negligent in your parenting, and that this sort of danger was imminent. In this case, I can totally see the argument. I can totally see. Look, they provided a weapon to somebody that clearly should not have a weapon. Why does the kid even have one to begin? Even if he were completely healthy and not talking about shooting people up, probably still shouldn't have a weapon at that age. I don't know. Just seems to make basic sense. Obviously, that wasn't met. So in this case, I see it. I go, yeah, you probably should pay the price. You were beyond ignorant here as a parent, but that's not every case. I mean, and I guess that would be something where, do we then end up taking every parent to court? I mean, because that seems to be probably what would happen in many cases of proving that level of ignorance or willful ignorance. But that's not everything. Sometimes it is just somebody who is, you got a kid that's confused, that they're hanging out with some bad kids. You have no idea they have access to weapons or anything. They even think that way. They're just kind of out there. And parents struggle with that. Many parents would love to be close to their kids, even when they're in that state. They just want them to come back around, but maybe don't have the resources for therapy, don't have the resources to help in the ways that they would like to help. Do we prosecute all of them as well, only to get to the determination of, yeah, you didn't know anything about this. There really wasn't much you could do. I mean, I don't know. I mean, there just seems to be there needs to be accountability here, but where is that bar, and how do we know exactly what that will be? Should she be found guilty?
Really important questions. And I think when these sort of divisive, inflammatory events like a school shooting happens, it's human nature to want to jump to, oh my gosh, what are we going to do to prevent this? Let's make sure we're holding everyone involved accountable. And I understand that reaction. But we don't want to cast too broad of a net to where we are bringing people into the criminal justice system who don't necessarily deserve to be there. Parenting is hard as shit, man.
Hmm.
We don't know exactly. I saw some of the text messages between Jennifer, the mother, and Ethan, the son, on the day of, and or the day before, excuse me. And so far, they did not seem horribly problematic. The school called Jennifer and said, "Hey, Ethan's looking at some ammunition." Jennifer texts Ethan in sort of an alarmed way, and what's going on? And Ethan says, "Oh gosh, I was just looking at some ammunition, no big deal." Reassures the mother. And so, how are we going to determine which parents are the worst parents such that they should go to prison when an event happens like this? I think that gets a little too murky, and I'm not sure jurors are qualified to make that determination.
Is this another one of those things where, we can punish someone, we can feel good about it, we got another person put away for some? I mean, and there needs to be some accountability here for parents. I completely 100% agree. There needs to be some accountability for parents with troubled children. But it needs to be done reasonably, and it seems we're kind of overstepping the big elephant in the room here: mental health, and the lack thereof, and the lack of access to it. And I think the lack of education that I think a lot of parents have in terms of even how to deal with their children, or even knowing the steps of what to do to help get somebody the help that they need. It's hard enough sometimes just to go into the doctor's office for some sort of malady that's going on with your body. You got a mole that needs to be removed. One will be like, "Well, you're good." The next one's like, "Oh God, go to the dermatologist now and get rid of it." When we're talking mental health, it's a whole other thing, and a lot of insurances don't even cover it very well. I mean, it seems that again we're just overstepping and not looking at what the real issue is here. We need to get a grip on the importance of mental health in our country, not just a grip on let's try and punish everyone we possibly can, or I blame a gun, or blame the parent, or blame this or that. All these things need to come into focus in some sort of way. But I don't know. This just seems like it's another giant gray area that we're going to be stepping into.
Oh, 100%. And you hit the nail on the head. The mental health piece is a critical element of this that I think is being, um, uh, if not ignored, then not given enough attention to, for sure. But also, like you said, what sort of parenting paradigm is the best that we're going to, require of parents? And if they don't meet it, we're going to put them in prison. One parent who has a troubled teen might think, oh, let me be very hands on and strict and give structure and law and order, whatever. Whereas another parent might say, hey, this kid sort of has to find himself and work through this on his own, and I'm going to be there in a supervisory fashion. But who's to say which of those two
Yeah.
approaches is better and which should land someone in prison?
It's a weird thing because you're arguing, and you're looking at parents with troubled children and saying, okay, determine if this one's going to go shoot up a school. And statistically, that's a very small percentage. It happens, obviously, but if you look at the big picture, we're probably talking 0.0000001% of kids that are troubled in this country actually carry something like that out. I mean, it's one thing if you're planning it and there's evidence of that. Yeah, let's take a look at that. Let's punish that severely and swiftly. But I don't know, to go to a parent and say, you should have seen this coming. If there was warning signs, that's one thing. But if there's not, and I think in so many cases there simply isn't a whole lot, um, how do you litigate that?
100%. And by the same token, if you're going to say, oh, the parents should have known about this, do we then look to other folks with whom that child had significant interactions? They're with the teacher sometimes more hours than they are the parents, at least during the week. Do
Yeah.
we look to the teachers and say, hey, you all should have known about this too? We're going to put you behind bars as well. That is just a misguided approach, in my impression.
Yeah. I mean, you would have to look at everyone who has some sort of interaction and apply the same measure of judgment.
Where
It's
does
like,
it stop?
yeah, it just, I don't know. Would this apply retroactively? I mean, let's say she were to be found guilty here, which is a very real possibility. Well, can they look back at previous cases where it looks like the parents had some sort of culpability and go back and would charges be able to be pressed retroactively if something like this were to move the way it does?
I think they most certainly could be, and you know, especially with these school shootings, the only bar to bringing charges, practically speaking, would be the statute of limitations, and that statute has not run on the vast majority of school shootings that have happened in recent memory. And so, if Jennifer Crumbley, the mother, is convicted, do they then go back to Dylan Klebold's mother from Columbine, decades and decades ago? How far are we going to go back? It's really a slippery slope problem that I think could get out of hand if we don't keep a close eye on it.
And ultimately, would it, will it slow down anything in terms of these sort of things taking place if all these parents are being punished? Maybe. I don't know. I mean, uh, responsible parents are already not necessarily, for the most part, in these situations in a lot of cases. There's caveats to everything. But a lot of times, yeah, you already have people who are going to be responsible. They're not going to find themselves here. And the ones who already are irresponsible, there's no amount of litigation or rules or laws in the world that will change them. Some people are just not that smart.
Sure. Yeah. There's going to be people who get sort of caught in this net if we go forward with this. Folks who have, even, and we got to think about people who might have less resources,
Yeah.
less information about parenting, less availability. Maybe they're working two jobs. Now, I'm not saying that's an excuse for any criminal
No.
conduct, but I'm saying those are factors to at least consider in deciding how we're going to hold these parents accountable going forward.
Yeah. It's one to watch. Hey, it's Tony Brueski. If you like the podcast, be sure to like, subscribe, and press that bell so you don't miss any of our updates on the cases we're following for you right here at the Hidden Killers podcast from True Crime Today. And thanks